Awesome. If everyone could just turn on their cameras and unmute yourself, because tonight I want to continue with our experience of a back and forth conversation. We want a candid conversation of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So let's get this party started like Don said. Who knows the words to that song?
I don't think I
Get
did.
this party started. Nobody knows the word?
That's all the words.
That shows how old we are.
Is it by Pink?
I have no idea who it's by. Anyway, tonight we want to talk about how do we keep our speeches interesting? Interesting. There are plenty of ways to do these and lots of tips and tricks on how to make them go. There is one that you always hear me say over and over and over again. Because we know that being nervous is probably the most fearful thing facing people in the public speaking realm. They're nervous and, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't talk anymore. Oh my God, I can't breathe. It's okay. Relax. So when I keep telling you about how to get rid of your nerves, it's always the thought process in my head that if you are educated on what's going on, then the nervous parts disappear. For instance, when you were riding a bike, you were very nervous when you first learned how to ride a bike, but you had to get on that bike. Whether you had training wheels or not, you had to get on the bike and you had to move. And you were nervous. But you practiced and you practiced and you practiced until the point you don't care anymore. Your muscle memory works and everything goes on. You started to learn how to drive a car. Oh my God, you're driving a 4-ton car around. Gas goes, ooh, it's moving. Slam on the brake. Oop, I went too far. Because you end up slamming on the brake too hard. So you practiced. And you got the feel of the car. You got the feel of the gas. You got the feel of the brake. And you practice and you learn how to do it. And you learn how to do the turns and everything. And you practice. And I've always tell everyone here, if you're getting ready for a speech, practice, practice, practice. This will get you to help get rid of those nerves and things that are going on. And if you need to have some additional help with your nerves, before you start speaking, take a deep breath and let it out. Everybody, right now, everybody, take a deep breath and let it out. One more time. Deep breath, let it out. Now, do you feel more relaxed just from that one breath? You get up there to speak, you do that, you'll feel relaxed, you'll have clear thoughts in your head, and you'll be able to go on with whatever you're doing. So if you want to get rid of your nerves, practice, practice, practice. Now, who can tell me another one? Anybody?
Are you asking about
Another tip, you mean?
interesting
Another
or
tip, another thing to go on that we want to keep the speech interesting. For instance, Hal runs a business. So Hal has to know his audience. So how does knowing your audience play into your speech?
are you asking me?
Sure. Go ahead. You can answer. Anyone can answer.
I think a whole bunch of ways. If you understand your audience, this is, by the way, this is just straight out of the screenwriting world. If they don't understand their audience, they're writing to themselves. If they understand their audience, then they write in a different way. So if I was writing to, let's say my audience was mainly men over 40, I would write in a completely different way than if I was writing to teenage kids who are going to school, boys and girls, right? They have completely different lives, completely different understandings, all of that. So you're speaking directly to their needs, their goals, their issues, what matters to them, right? All of those kinds of things, that's what you're talking to in that case. So that would be my thoughts on the audience thing.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Before you begin to craft any message whatsoever, you should always consider who the message is intended for. So you're absolutely correct, Hal. You want to be able to learn as much about your listeners as you can. And this will help determine the choice of words, the level of information, the motivational statements that you use. So yes, Hal, I absolutely agree with you 100%. Yes. Anybody else?
Oh, by the way,
Joey?
let me say something else. So we had a lady that came in at one point, and I think she only came to 2 meetings, and she did a speech that was absolutely 100% geared toward a specific audience, right? She did a speech that was for a Christian audience, as if she was talking at church. And my guess is most of us didn't relate, right? So when I listened to her speech, it was like, oh, wow, that's great. She's practicing that. She's going to do really, really well. But if she was trying to talk to this audience, she would have changed that speech in a whole bunch of different ways to have us consider it, have us relate to it, to have us feel good about it. So that's just one of those things where it's like, I understand she was trying to practice so she could go back to the other audience, and sometimes that's important. But if I was doing that, I would do what I could to have it relate to the group that's there and understand the group that's there. And by the way, one more thing on this: in corporate training, after doing about 25 speeches that didn't make any difference, we started doing this. They would hire us to come in and do a training program, and I would ask to interview 2 people who represent the audience. And I'd do a 15-minute interview with each of them, asking them, I had a series of questions so that I could relate it directly to them. And then when I stood up to start the speech, I would say something like, let me make sure I'm in the right place. You guys have this going on, and this going on, and you're trying to solve this problem. Is that right? And then people would go, yes. And then after that, everything I said, they felt connected to them. So, okay, back to you, Jim.
Awesome. Don, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I think what Hal said and is spot on, and I think all the comments so far are appropriate. I think one of the things that definitely helps me, and certainly being able to scout out, maybe talk to the audience, or at least get an idea if you don't get a chance to maybe interview with individual people to get some knowledge of it, is really just to keep in mind that you need to have a message. Some might call it, I know Lance calls it maybe the core idea. I mistook different ways, but you should be able to write your message in one sentence of what is it you're really trying to convey to the audience. Now, that may vary, if you have an informational speech or persuasive, that type of thing. But when you're doing that, it really, I think, for me, really helps me stay focused, because when you're out there, there's often the feeling like, oh my gosh, what if I forget a line? What if I forgot what I was going to say? It won't matter. The audience probably isn't going to recognize it. But if the focus of your talk, and it will be more conversational, is around what is it you really want to convey to this audience? What would you like them to get from this? I think it does a lot to help combat nervousness, but also just is going to make you more interactive, almost more conversational with the group than if you're just sort of trying to recite something along the lines of, points A, B, and 3 are all great, but you got to have that short message. And the shorter it is, the better, because that's what's going to keep you more on track than, a bunch of different points that you're trying to stick together in your mind.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Mm.
All right. So that kind of rolls into the next thought process in terms of making your speech more fun and more interactive and more interesting, right? 'Cause Don, you mentioned 1, 2, 3 or ABC, however you outline it, right? So you're talking about organizing your material in the most effective manner in order to attain the purpose. Now, when you're trying to do that, you want to create a framework for your speech. So write down the topic, write down the general purpose and the specific purpose of what you're trying to portray to the audience, right? And then write down your different main points and make sure to grab the audience's attention within the first 30 seconds of your speech. And this is done similar to the way that Al was talking about when he said that he walked out there, he did the 3 questions, and he said, "This is what you're trying to solve," and then everyone relates to it. Right? So it's the same thought process, right? Within the first 30 seconds of your speech, you want to bam and hit that audience in order to make that audience sit there and say, "Ooh, really? I want to listen. What's going on?" So organizing your information is very important in order to lead the audience to where you want to go. Because all children will perform to the level of expectations upon them. And when you deliver your speech, they will react and respond in the way that you want if you deliver it properly. Now, I'm sitting here talking about the reactions and what's going to happen. So if you're out there and you're watching your audience, now it's kind of hard to do it here, right? So here we're on Zoom here. So unless you're actually looking at all the different squares, and we tell you, oh, you're supposed to look at this camera, don't look at the squares. But if you don't look at the squares, you can't see the feedback. Right? You're not focusing on the audience. You're not gauging their reactions. You're not gauging anything, right? But when you do it, when you're actually talking to the audience and you're actually watching the audience, you want to gauge their reactions. You want to adjust your message. You want to be flexible with your delivery stuff. You can have a canned speech, and by adjusting that canned speech, you can guarantee that you're not going to lose the attention or confuse the audience with anything that you want to say. But you have to be able to be aware of what the audience is doing. Right? And this is one of the pieces in our evaluations where it talks about your attention to the audience. I forget what is it actually called on the eval sheet? Does anyone remember?
Your attention to the audience? You mean
Well, it's it
are,
it's something audience. I forget what the actual name on the eval sheet
is
is.
it like audience awareness or
Yeah,
audience
there you go.
interaction?
Audience awareness.
Okay.
Right. So you want to be able to do feel the audience awareness and be able to react and move accordingly and change your speech up. If you see that someone's in the audience and he's out there and you might want to call on that person. Oh, Jim, hey, what do you think? Right? Engage them. If you have audience members that are sleeping, engage the audience. Make them part of your speech. Do something with it. So who has thoughts on that process? Because I've gone over a lot of stuff here now and I've been talking, but I haven't heard anything from anybody. Anybody?
Yeah, I still have a couple of things to say.
Come on now. Let's hear them.
Let's see. I was just doing a program where I had like 80 people on Zoom. And I noticed that a couple were like not participating in that kind of thing. So I just started doing things like this. I just started going. So for instance, my guess is that Reggie is wondering how he could use this and what he's doing. And I started calling different people's names out and they immediately responded. And all they did was like, oh my God, he just said my name. So that was just simple. Right. But of course, you could also ask questions, interact. You could ask for shows of hands. You could ask for them to do something. Everybody lean into your screen or whatever. So yeah, I think interact. See, look, Reggie just showed up. Good to see you, Reggie. I think interacting with an audience, and Jim, you're great at it. I think interacting with an audience is something that brings them back over and over, and it has them know that they're going to be on their toes. Certainly. Vivian also does it. So yeah.
Cool. And I see Nadine over there biting her nail. She doesn't want to answer. She's biting her nails. Nope, nope. Don't call on me, Jim. Don't call on me. Okay, I won't call on Nadine. Santi, how do we interact with Nadine while she's biting her nails? Because she's so nervous, she doesn't want to talk.
Don't
We
take
can't
that.
we can't hear
Don't
you,
take
son.
that.
Asking them the questions like what their thoughts on like what just happened.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Ask her. Ask her. Yeah. If you're gonna ask her, Santi, the first thing you have to do is say her name. So
Nadine,
there you go. There you go. Now ask the question.
what do you think about being interactive in the speech? Like, what type of questions do you think the speaker should ask?
Okay, thank you, Santi. Well, the whole the whole talk about this has brought me back to the original thought of why I joined Toastmasters. Years ago, I think 2 years ago, someone asked me to lead a class and talk about how I basically started film editing in America, and I was supposed to teach a class in Germany about how I did my stuff and what's different. And I had all these awesome PowerPoint presentation. I was gonna like just wing it and just do it like somehow. Oh my God. And then I started, and the first question I asked was, so is anyone interested in going to America? And everyone said no. And from that point, I had no idea what I'm gonna do. How I'm gonna lead this. It was the worst ever. I told myself I hate being a teacher. I cannot ever do this again. I was stuttering. I was stuck with my own question. I was repeating myself. I didn't know what to say. My whole PowerPoint stuff didn't work out. I was talking too fast. Nobody had any idea what I was saying. I was assuming they knew words that we use in here in like the business, and then someone was like, "What is that? What are you talking about?" Oh yeah, this and this thing, and then okay, anyone else has a question? It was horrible. So I'm just thinking about this experience, about with that specific audience, because also nobody was responding ever. They were all muted. They would maybe like put on a clap sign, a sign like the little emojis, but in their faces, it was dead. So I just remember that audience about and how I tried to teach someone and it just was gone horribly wrong. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to change that, learn how to do this right. That's why I joined Toastmasters.
Awesome. Well, you know what?
That
That is a beautiful segue into the next section that I wanted to cover. And we're gonna throw this segue right down to Lalitha and Reggie. We're gonna smack them with it. Right?
No
So
way.
yes, way. Reggie and Lalitha both, right? We're gonna smack them with it. Right on the head. Boom. And I'm going to be asking for their reactions to the next part because Nadine, what you just said, what you just talked about leads very much into the next piece that I want to talk about. Your personality. It's all about your personality when you're speaking. You want your personality to come through. The audience doesn't care what you talk about. They want you. Be yourself. Don't be some talking head. Oh, you got these PowerPoints and all these things. Who cares? Nobody cares. Any type of communication makes no difference. You will establish better credibility for yourself if your personality shines through. All of the people in the audience will trust you. They will trust what you have to say. They will listen to you, and they can see that you are a real person, not somebody just spouting some facts. Now, when you do that and you add that personality, your speeches automatically become interesting. And a lot of times you'll see people will get up there. Well, I want to tell you about, oh, let me tell you three things. Yeah. Throw that out the window. Let the personality come through. So, Lalitha, Reggie, you've been around, you've seen speeches done by different people here. You now is your chance to talk. You guys can talk about the people in this club. I give you free permission to talk about it. When you sit there and you listen to the speeches, who do you see that has a personality that comes through? And who do you see that just sits there, blah, 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 blah. And I'm asking for specific names because there's a reason. Maybe the person who's doing the blah, blah, blah doesn't know they're doing it. And you can help that person by asking them to let their personality shine through. So tell us something.
I remember in the speech was done by Robert. I remember that because he came out with a talk and the questions, even though his voice was, he's looking somewhere, but I remember. So that's one of the speech. And one of the speech from Hal, I still remember. It is really good because he's asking audience to involve. So his personality brought like, your all the people are involved, and still I can resemble that questions in my mind when I remember about the situation. So that is where we are getting along with the speech and some of your talk, the classes as well, which is really useful for me. For example, when I remember my first or second speech, I have a lot of hours, and I think I counted around 63.
That's a lot that you count on yourself.
Okay, so after that, it just come down like, so much. So that's where I relate to myself. So I'm always, when I talk somebody in office or in any environment, when a third person comes in, that immediately kicks in my mind backside. I'm aware of it. So that's where
Awesome.
I talk nicely with those people.
Awesome. Wonderful. Lalitha, your turn.
Yes. Yeah, I enjoy most of the speeches of Hale at yours, Jim. Sometimes I enjoy the Vivian's too. They are very interactive, and some jokes in between the speeches makes the people be alert and then have a fun and then come back to what she's trying to talk. That is also like, I like the way she writes the speech. And Shanti, initially when I joined, I heard of your speeches. It used to be very great. I would like to listen more. Your way of speaking, your way of talking, your interactions is very awesome. Come back and give speeches.
You heard that, Santi? You heard that? The challenge is laid out there. That the road is Lalitha is paving the road for you. It's time for you to speak some more.
Yeah.
All right,
got
everybody.
Motivated from you initially.
Okay, everybody,
when I got.
Take a finger like this. Everyone, take your finger like this. All right. Now, when you take that finger, point it at May. Everyone, point it at May. There you go, May. We're all pointing at you because you promised to do more speaking. And we've only heard one speech from you.
Exactly.
In 2 years. We want to hear more.
Yeah.
So Lalitha laid the challenge. Lalitha laid the challenge down for Santi. So the rest of us are pointing at you. So we're all laying down the challenge for you.
Yes, May. I know you do very well in Toastmaster, but we want to listen more about your speeches too.
Thanks, Jim.
You must be feeling pretty rowdy.
Yeah.
I like your gestures. Smack them across the head. Everybody point to May.
So May, I only have one request, May. Keep your eyes open.
That is a very tall order because my eyes are so small. They are open. Can I wear those glasses where
May and I have
with the eyes are open?
May and I have this running joke where I keep telling her, open her eyes, open her eyes.
Yes.
All right. So
I'm sorry.
no worries, man. You're good. So Lalitha brought up a really important piece to understand. And this is really important for any speech that we talk about. And she singled out Vivian because Vivian does it very, very well. And every now and then Hal does it very, very well. You want to have humor or effective language in your stories, right? So you're telling a story, you want to inject some funny anecdote in your presentation. You'll certainly grab your audience attention when you do it. Audiences always like a personal touch in a speech. A story can provide that. So if you're going to be out there and you're giving a speech and you're talking about different events that are happening, relate it to yourself. When you can relate it to yourself and the audience is part of your speech, they can relate to you. They see the personal touch that's involved. They're in your shoes while you're relaying that story. Right. So when you do it colorful too, right? Don't sit there and just say, "Oh, I saw a car accident the other day and I pulled over and I wanted to help." That doesn't relay anything. But when you sit there and say, "I saw a car accident the other day and cars were just zipping by. Nobody was paying attention. They're driving down the highway at 90 miles an hour. I had to pull over. I had to help these people. They seemed like they were stuck." You see the difference in the way that it is, right? It it shows action, it shows emotion, it puts you in the scene. I can probably imagine that every single one of you, when I just said that one little bit, you were visualizing cars going 90 miles an hour. So if you add that kind of stuff into the speech, right, it's your personal experience and you're telling your personal experience and you're putting it out there and you're involving the whole audience. It makes a big difference in your speech. Now, I do have to say that a lot of people, when they try to do these kind of things and they're doing all this preparation, they have the outline out here or the speech. And if you're reading the speech, unless you're a very, very good reader, it's going to be difficult for you to put yourself into that speech. And your audience is going to know that you're reading. So I recommend that you don't read, especially now that we're in person. Don't come up there with a piece of paper and you're just going to read. If you have to have notes, put them on index cards in some sort of outline form, right? So you bullets. Uh, Toastmasters doesn't say you have to memorize a speech, and I don't want you to memorize a speech because if you memorize a speech, you're not you. That speech is not you. So if you have to have memory joggers, just have them on an index card so that you can quickly look at it, see one or two words, and you know where you are and you know the next thing you're going to talk about. Because you've lived the experience. It's already inside your head. It's already inside your heart. Let it come out.
Hey,
So
Jim,
yes,
sorry,
Ash.
when you are not talking about the memory, some other speeches, so how I guess I have a hard time remembering my speech. Even when I try to memorize it, that's why I kind of have to read it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to emphasize. I know that you guys have heard me say it before, and I always give credit to Vivian. Life is not a prepared speech. It really isn't. So Ash, if you took things and you jotted them down on an index card, right? A 3x5 index card, and you jotted the pieces down, then you can look that index card and then you can talk. You've lived the experience, correct? If you wanted to talk about something that happened at your work, you've lived that experience. You were there. So if you just write down one or two words that will jog your memory about that experience, you will be able to give that speech. Unless you're telling me you have full on Alzheimer's and you forget everything, Are you that old?
Getting there.
now, now you make me feel like like you're catching up to me here. I don't know. Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry, Ash. Just use the bullet points and look at, right. You don't have to memorize the speech. You don't have to read the speech word for word. Just use the bullet points and you're good to go. Something to jog your memory. Yes, Hal, you were going to say something?
Well, first, I completely agree with this. I think reading a speech is what you do at home while you're trying to figure it out, right? And then you create your bullet points. Like, let's say you've written the whole speech, then you go create your bullet points and practice it using the bullet points and just get as close as you can, right? When you stand up to speak, this was the best advice I ever got from a professional speaker. I got up on stage, did a terrible job. And then I saw him do it and I was like, oh my God, this guy was amazing. So I went up and asked him for his advice. And here's what he said. He said, first he told me, he says, you know what? He says, you got some good points, but you looked like you were worried you weren't going to say the right things. And I said, yes, the whole time. I missed 3 or 4 points. I made mistakes, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, first, the audience doesn't know that. But he said, my model, and this is what I took on, is you prepare as best you can. And then when you get on stage, whatever you do is okay. It doesn't, listen, all this, a lot of times I've seen people do this where they'll start reading their speech and then they'll mess it up and then they'll go back and repeat it. And it's like, what are they doing? They're not interacting with their audience and they're not presenting something. They're trying to make sure they read this perfectly for their 3rd grade teacher or something. So I just started using his model. It's like, I'm going to prepare as best I can. And then when I get up there, whatever comes out is totally okay. Right. And, bullet points, whether you use a card, when I was doing a lot of corporate training, a lot of times I would write down, here's my bullet points on just a standard piece of paper, or maybe 2, go up. I've got the 2 pieces of paper. I don't try to hide them. I don't try to worry about them. I just put them straight out so I can see both pieces of paper. And then I just do the speech. And I've had people say, wow, you didn't even look at your notes. And it's like, no, I did. I looked at them 30 times. But I was talking to them. I was interacting with them. They were engaged. And because of that, they didn't even notice when I glanced down and see where I'm at. One more thing on the notes, always make them as simple as possible and as clear as possible. If you put a bullet point and then you put 3 sentences, you won't be able to get that in a glance, right? So I try to put half a sentence on every one of them, 4, 5, 6 words. And that way it just gives me, here's what this point is. It's connect the audience to the pain or whatever, right? And so it's like, they're just real simple, real clear. And I've got basically my organization. And then from there you flow. Jim's doing that right now, right? Every time we see Jim speak, he knows what he wants to do. He's formulated it either in his mind or in some kind of short notes, and then he just flows. And you know what? If you don't end up saying it perfectly, nobody in the audience knows, and that's it. So
anyway. That just reminds me of the very first time I ever got up to do any type of public speaking was in high school. And I was supposed to give a 10-minute speech on a project that we were doing. And I wrote this speech out. I had 2 full pages of stuff and I started to read it and I looked at it and I started to read and I looked at it and then I just took the paper and oh, the hell with this crap. And I threw the paper away and I just talked from the top of my head. And from that point on, I never had any fear about public speaking whatsoever. So while everyone here, while you all have these fears about public speaking, I no longer know what that fear is because I threw those papers away. And the lesson that Hal was talking about, I had learned while I was in high school, because when I'm in front of the audience, nobody knows. I'm speaking.
Right.
I'm the expert. Nobody knows whether I'm right or wrong. You just get out there.
The follow-on question. So in a situation like that, when you have some bullet points and you basically not making it up, but improvising to some extent,
Huh?
how do you stay within the time? I mean, you might be talking, every sentence might be much longer or much shorter what you plan to do, right?
Mhm.
How do you do that?
I count. I don't know about anyone else. I count. Every 60 is 1 minute.
Yeah. I do something a little different on that. It's like we can find out when, right, when the green shows up, when the yellow shows up, when the red shows up, right?
Yep.
So if the red shows up, my job is to wrap this up in 2 or 3 sentences. No matter what's going on, that's the job. If the yellow has shown up and I didn't even notice before that, then it's like, okay, now I need to get to a summary or get to the close, even if I'm only halfway through the speech, right? If the green shows up, then it's like, I can imagine, all right, I've got about 1.5 to 2 minutes here, plus or minus, so I can still make a couple of points. But that's part of this. It's like in table topics, we're constantly getting a chance to see those 3 time frames so we can think that way. And I would just be looking at what's my purpose with each time frame. And that way it's like you might have a situation like you were just talking about, Ash, where you've only done half the speech and already you're in yellow. And it's like, okay, don't tell us you've only done half the speech. It's just time to start wrapping this up. Make your final point and, send it home. So yeah. So I think that's part of what the whole timing thing is about, is us getting time management.
One question I have,
Yep.
Jim, like when we give the speech, to use a good vocabulary words is that reads the speech, or like general terminology, use that and give the speech, whatever it is from your mind.
Sure.
Which one?
Well, that would depend on your audience. So if my audience is this group, I would just use regular words. But if I'm talking in front of a group of lawyers, I would use a lot higher vocabulary.
So
Would you
speaker
put some
practice will
disdain in
help.
there for the lawyers also? I just want checking, Jim.
Depends on what type of lawyers they are.
Okay.
But when we talk in public, so is it to use the general words?
Yeah, you would use general words because public is your least common denominator.
But when I listen to a good vocabulary speeches, I feel like, wow. So that comes with the practice.
Yes, it does. It also comes with reading.
It does. It comes with reading.
Yeah, the more you read, the higher your vocabulary will become. Because you'll run across words that you don't understand, you'll start looking them up and you'll start using them.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what happens with me when I write the speech. I write all the vocabulary words. But when I come talking, like I don't remember them. Like I use them whatever.
Well, those should become your bullet points.
Yeah, good point. Good point. But I think you should still feel good about it, right? You went through the process, you figured out how to write that speech, you delivered something a little different, but now it's part of your thinking to a degree. Maybe next time use those same words in the next speech. You'll find you probably get half of them in, and sooner or later it's how you speak, right? So,
All right. So the next point I want to talk about. You guys see my hands, right? They get used, right? I use them all the time. I'm Italian, right? So I use them all the time. But a lot of times when people are when they're talking, they'll sit there and they'll go like this. Or they'll have their hands clasped, or they'll go like this, or they'll put their hands behind their back. All right. So those are usually gestures of nervousness. They're improperly used gestures for the speech that you're giving. You want to make sure that you use the right gestures in your speech. You want to make sure that you use the correct voice inflections and everything, right? So nonverbal communication carries most of your message. I don't care what people sit there and think about my words. If they can see my hands, they can hear my voice, even the tone of my voice makes a difference. I guarantee you they'll pay attention if I speak in a louder voice because they know I'm mad and it's something I want to get across and they're not listening. Or I can talk like this and just be nice and calm. Right. So how you talk and how you use your voice inflection, the pauses that you use, the hand gestures that emphasize the things that are coming out of your mouth, they all make a difference. So don't use anything that is a nervous movement because it will detract from the effectiveness of your speech and the things that you're trying to get across. Now, we did talk about trying to grab the audience's attention. And I want you to make sure that when you grab the audience's attention, you do it at the very beginning of the speech and at the end. A lot of times, in order to make that happen, you want to start off with a strong statement at the start of your speech, and you want to end with that same basic statement at the end, so that you tie your speech back and forth. You tie it together. And this will make the audience think about what the message was. So if you start with your message, you give all the supporting data, and then you end with your message, you're driving home your point. These are things that are important in order to make sure that what you want the audience to take away when they leave is there inside their head. And the last thing I want to talk about now is visual aids. So a lot of times you see I come out here and we do these mentoring sessions and I have PowerPoint slides. Tonight, we're not using PowerPoint slides at all. We're just talking back and forth and we're conversing because life is not a prepared speech. But when you're going to use PowerPoints, you want to make sure that there's a reason to use them. If you're going to use an audio clip or a video clip, you want to make sure there's a reason to use them. If you don't have a reason to use them, throw them away. If they're not going to drive home your point, throw it away. The audience doesn't care what the facts are. The audience wants to know you. They want to know what you feel. They want to know what you experience. They want to know your story. They want to know your personality. The audience wants you. So don't go using things that are becoming distractors if you don't need them. Now, if your speech requires that you have them to prove a point or to drive home a point, then use them. Otherwise, don't bother. How many people have given speeches using PowerPoints? Raise your hand. And all of you who have used the PowerPoints, how many of those speeches could have you done without the PowerPoints?
Every one of them.
Hal says everyone. Ash? I can't hear you, Ash. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
But I think that if you know, it's like, I think, especially if you're presenting something complex, it helps for them to be able to see it, even if it's just the words organized, right?
Again, if it aids in what you're saying,
yeah,
by all means, use them. If it doesn't aid you, if it doesn't bring forth something to your audience other than the words that you're saying, then it's a distraction.
Yeah.
I know what I've done wrong is that I've basically used them as the bullet points that you're talking about. So rather than have the bullet points in front of me, I've put the bullet points over there on the screen so I can remember what I'm going to be talking about.
If you're going to do that, Ash, if you're going to do that as bullet points, don't use words. Put pictures. Put the pictures that will remind you. Because then the audience will still be listening to you instead of reading. use pictures.
So
Right, so I've covered everything that I wanted to talk about. I guarantee you that if you do these things, your speeches will become more effective. I don't guarantee that your speeches will be perfect. And everyone sits there and says, practice makes perfect. And I keep telling you, practice, practice, practice. But I will also tell you, practice will not make perfect.
Mhm.
Perfect practice will make perfect. And we're not perfect. So you can't get perfect practice. So no matter what you do, your speech will never be perfect. So stop trying to attain it. Be yourself. Get out there. That audience wants you. Regardless of what your speech is, regardless of the point that you're trying to drive home, the audience wants you. They want your personality. They want your stories. They want to be able to relate to you. Let that shine through, and your speech will be a success no matter what the topic is. All right. So does anyone have anything that they want to discuss regarding these type of things? Otherwise, we're going to turn around and jump into Vivian's speech.
One question.
Yes, sir. Your question.
Mainly, we prepared without slides or the little points.
Uh-huh.
If you can memorize, that would be the first preference, right?
I would.
Memorize.
I don't want you to memorize a single speech. I never want you to memorize a speech.
Never.
I want you to be able to speak from your heart.
Okay.
That's my goal. My goal is to let you speak from the heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
We're
the
not in
first-
school anymore.
Yeah.
So the bullet points are the one which, like you want to expand on some of the
Correct.
stuff. Yeah, okay.
Correct. And when I do bullet points, I usually like to just have a list of words. Single words. I don't use sentences or any, just words. One word per line.
Now, I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
And this would be for you, Jim, and maybe Nadine. I was up there last week and I thought, wow, what if I had chosen to do some kind of PowerPoint, right? It's like, but I'm in a live situation. There's some kind of logistics for how would we set it up so that the audience in the live situation would be able to see the entire screen. Would I have to essentially be online, even though
You have a computer that's online.
we have a
There's-
computer online, but I mean, so the slides, then
The
we would have
slides,
to upload to
the
that
slides
computer.
would be on that computer.
Okay.
Right. So it wouldn't necessarily be on your computer. It would be on that computer inside the room. And then you would just have a clicker to go through the slides, right?
Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense, Nadine? Does that sound right? Do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, we could also, you could, if you wanted to use your computer, we would just need to set that up to be connected to the rest of the stuff. But yeah, and then you would just share your screen the way you do it on Zoom, share your PowerPoint, you put it on full screen, and then you can see it on the back
Okay. All right.
for everyone in the room. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Spectacular. Thank you. Okay. Back to you, Jim.
Are there any other questions? Any other interactions? Come on. Let's go. Let's hear some. Let's have some fun. Oh my God, we're Toastmasters. Come on.
What
Okay.
if
All right.
what if your
We all
story
can't
is
wait
boring?
for.
Sorry. What if your story is boring?
It's
Ah.
only as boring as you allow it to be.
Mm.
Then should we use that story?
If you want to make a boring story and deliver a boring story, then it's boring. If you want to make it interesting, follow the rules and the things that we just went through, and you'll make it a whole lot more interesting.
For one of the upcoming mentor sessions, I can do a thing on how you tell a story in a highly compelling way.
There you go.
Yeah, that
I would
comes
love to do
straight
that.
from screenwriting, from the screenwriting world. How do you create a
That
story?
sounds like a great mentoring session. Maybe you should do the next mentoring session.
Yeah.
Maybe. When would that
Okay,
be?
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
On
Like
That's 8th.
Yeah,
August
the
8th.
second week of the second
Okay.
Tuesday of August.
All right, August 8th. Remind me next week and
Sure.
and we'll do that.
Okay. All right. So let me stop recording here. Where's the recording thing here? I'm going to stop recording.